Hey, it's your pal Mike Shea from the website Sly Flourish and author of the books The Lazy Dungeon Master and Sly Flourish's Fantastic Locations. I'm going to be hosting a brand new show on the Don't Split the Podcast network called the DM's Deep Dive. Each month, I'll be talking to a member of the D&D community about a particular topic of the game like encounter design, tools for improvisation, and game pacing. You can subscribe to the show through iTunes, on Twitch, or on YouTube. Join me, and we'll all work together to make our games fantastic.
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. This week on the show, I'm talking with Greg Blair and Humza Kazmi. We are talking about the OSR. A couple weeks ago, I had a podcast where I mentioned the OSR, and I did not really understand what it was or talk about it eloquently. This podcast is meant to help me understand the amazingness that is the OSR and to help you understand it as well. I really learned a ton, and these guys were just awesome, passionate people, and it sounds like that's what the OSR is, a community of people just like that. But I'll let Greg and Humza tell you about it.
All right, everybody, now I'm here with Greg Blair and Humza Kazmi. Guys, welcome to Tabletop Babble. It is super awesome to have both of you here. We are going to be talking about the OSR today, and I'm going to be getting an education that I badly need. But before we do that, why don't we learn who our guests are? So, Greg, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Oh, wow. I like to play them a lot. I'm pretty active over on Google Plus in the general kind of OSR kind of community. Like to talk to folks. I guess I'm affiliated with the Mongol Banquet Club. We put out a couple things recently. So we're just a bunch of idiots who make stupid jokes and then make PDFs out of it is really what it comes down to. But there's definitely some good gameable stuff in there. And I like to chat it up over on Twitter too. So yeah. I don't really make stuff, but I'm really active. I have a lot of fun.
I mean, you made several terrifying bears that are in a product I own, so that's not...
Several terrifying bears is a really good pitch. I mean, I'm sold already.
Thanks, Humza.
Exactly.
Well, you also are familiar with bears.
Indeed.
So.
So, Humza, who are you, and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
I'm Humza Kazmi. I'm a partner over at the Hydra Cooperative, a small OSR publisher. We work on other game lines also, but our flagship stuff has been OSR-oriented. On my day job, I'm an immigration attorney, but right here, right now, all gaming.
That's awesome. Well, it is great to have you on, finally, this podcast, because let me give a little background here. We had a podcast several weeks ago where we were talking about sort of me and a bunch of guests talking about what our favorite games were in various different genres of tabletop role-playing game. And this question of the OSR came up, and we did a very poor job, admittedly, of defining it and sort of picking great games from it. And I thought, well, I guess I need to have a podcast where I talk about the OSR and learn sort of what it is and what's out there. And, Greg is my good friend, and he is also my Lamentations of the Flame Princess game master. So I thought, wow, great guy to have on, right? And Humza, you and I have been sort of talking back and forth, trying to get you on the show. So this seemed like a perfect opportunity because of the work that you're doing with the Hydra Collective. So maybe we can start with, what is the OSR? And treat me like I know absolutely nothing. Oh, that's right, the Hydra Cooperative. I'm very sorry.
No, nothing to apologize for. We've actually had a few name confusion issues for a while. What happened is that we registered the business as the Hydra Collective. We're doing business as the Hydra Cooperative for a couple of boring legal reasons.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
I always thought that I was just inserting that somehow, so that's kind of funny. Because in my head, I'll say Hydra Collective sometimes. But then I think, the cooperative sounds so much cooler for some reason to me.
It does. How many cooperatives do you hear about? One.
I want to buy into this co-op and, get my organic farm-produced OSR meat, like.
Well, that's part of the idea. Like, people come on as partners rather than as employees, so it's a worker-owned type of thing. Everyone's got a share and got a voice in organizing the business and taking on new directions.
That's
really,
really cool.
You know what? And that actually is sort of this driving philosophy of OSR to me. Like, there's some folks who have, like, more sales or louder voices or, but at the end of the day, there's no one OSR. There's no gatekeeper. Nobody really gets to decide, well, that's OSR or that's not.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who wrote Lamentations, James Raggi, he hadn't asked me anything a few weeks ago, and he defined OSR as, broadly compatible with old editions of D&D.
Right.
But it's so much more than that. So that's his definition, and that's awesome. And that definition is great, and that works.
Mm-hmm.
But, my personal one extends it a lot more. It's sort of this philosophical bent, a method of playing, a mindset, an approach, It doesn't even have to be D&D.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my conception of the OSR, or my OSR, let me clarify, winds up having just as much influence from Traveler and RuneQuest as it does from D&D. Okay, maybe just as much might be a bit exaggerating a bit there, but it's drawing on those traditions also. No, I think Greg is spot on that you've got a wide variety of creators out there who are all looking to put together something new and interesting from a generalized similar framework. Definitely it starts in, is this mesh up with old school D&D in some way, but it winds up, from my perspective at least, taking on a bunch of jumps and using that as the baseline rather than the be-all and end-all.
Sure, yeah, I do think from what I've learned about it, that certainly makes sense and helps put it even into a better perspective. And just to get really into basics, right? OSR stands for Old School Renaissance.
Maybe.
Correct, right? Maybe? So
That
could it
is-
stand for something else?
Maybe.
It can, yes.
Yeah, that's the best part.
So, old school Renaissance, old school rules. Jeffrey Entz, one of the... We'll go with the Godfather here.
One of them, at least.
Yes, there are many Godfathers. Jeffrey Entz goes for the old school Ruckus, which I personally prefer because it's got a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, I'm not taking this seriously vibe, which I like.
Yeah.
Sure. And I think we should probably talk about that then. So, because I do think it is confusing. If you go to a site like Drive Through RPG or, for instance, I was just on Tabletop Library because we were talking about it before we started to record for this podcast. So they break things down and they have things like, 5th edition D&D, Pathfinder, and then underneath that is OSR, which makes it sound like it's its own rule set, the way Pathfinder or 5e are, which it's not. It is more a movement, right? Sort of phenomena, if you will, or group of people within the gaming community who are returning to kind of these roots, but also making new stuff. It's like inspired by, right? Sort of.
Inspired by is, I think, a good place to put it. Taking some variant of old school D&D as a starting inspiration point and jumping off from there. So there's no guarantee that any two OSR products that one picks up are going to necessarily be rules compatible with each other. But much of the OSR philosophy to me is that any GM is going to be able to likely convert between the two with minimal issues and minimal fuss and get something even cooler and more interesting by meshing up the two and putting their own spin on it. There's, to me, I think, a lot of personal encouragement to make the game your own and to take the various toolkits that are floating around and use them to create something new and making the game your stamp rather than just following one set of rules defined from on high.
Totally. I would, at least in the circles that I run in, that's one of the core kind of attitudes. If you're just, you shouldn't feel beholden. Well, this is exactly what it says, so that's what I have to do. There's there's a term that gets thrown around a lot when you're talking about OSR and this kind of stuff, retroclone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm approaching kind of this podcast as sort of like, you don't know anything about any of this. So
of course, yeah.
If this seems sort of basic.
Yeah, definitely.
So if this seems sort of basic, then apologies to the listeners.
Yeah, and if I start getting off too far in like some arcane jargon, please yell at me and tell me to clarify.
I think you're both doing great right now. This is awesome.
Well, we'll see. We'll keep each other in check, right, Humza?
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
So retroclones are these sort of emulations of older editions. Originally, I'd say probably of D&D, but that definition has certainly expanded, much like the OSR itself. And so one of the first retroclones is called Osric, old school reference and index compilation, right? And it's literally just a recreation of, I think, first edition AD&D.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's cool, and that's one kind of retroclone. But then after that, people would start to evolve, and they would take things and maybe bring in newer design paradigms and different kind of thoughts and methods. So I think I've heard it defined as different waves even of retroclones, right? So the first ones that emulated exactly the older editions of D&D, those would be like first wave retroclones. And then something like Lamentations of the Flame Princess that takes an older edition and then sort of iterates and evolves it a little bit. It'd be like second wave. And then something that takes it even further, emulating sort of not emulating, but taking those philosophies and those sort of design ideas, but then doing something even newer and more kind of innovative with it, really taking that evolution further, would be considered third wave. The only one that I'm really familiar with is Courtney Campbell's Perdition, which is awesome. But, it's all just evolving, and we're all just kind of feeding off each other. It's this great kind of creative wellspring that everyone's kind of contributing to.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of design interchange with people taking an existing rule set and saying, okay, that's cool. Let me see how I can tweak it to make it more my game, and codify that and figure out how to make the themes I want to bring out in my version of gaming come to the fore.
So what's really interesting about that, you're both talking about the evolution of this. It almost sounds like what happened was somebody said, let me, take this back to the beginning. And it's almost like we're seeing a new evolution of role-playing games because of it. Almost totally. It's almost a what-if comic, if you will, about like, well, what if these people had gotten involved and done it this way? It sounds like, maybe 20 years from now, they may have evolved into something entirely different that maybe doesn't evoke, the old school, quote unquote, of D&D at all, but is its own thing because it's evolved to that point. Or maybe it evokes, I don't know, like 4th edition D&D because it's, gone so crazy and it's wound up somewhere no one ever thought it would, Is that kind of thing possible?
I think it's going to happen much sooner than 20 years. You can look at something like Into the Odd, which was released a couple of years ago, I believe, which is pared down to actually 3 core stats, has super minimal rules. The entire booklet is maybe like, I want to say, 20, 30 pages or something. And you can look at Dungeon Crawl Classics, which is this gigantic tome. Now, granted, most of the tome is actually like spell descriptions, so it's not quite as bad as it looks, but you look at those 2 books and you would not initially think that these are coming out of the same design philosophy. And then you've got...
They are, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have things like Stars Without Number and Break, which Break is a forthcoming game a friend of mine is making that is admittedly not directly compatible, but they're coming very much out of this movement while still going off in even farther directions.
So it's interesting you brought up, right, the 2 different sizes of rule books, and this came up during the podcast because I had said that I had thought, the OSR maybe had simpler rules than something like a Pathfinder, right, for instance. And somebody else on the podcast said, well, no, I think they're kind of overly complicated rules, And then it was like, well, which is it? And so I guess that question is the OSR so broad that some games have very complicated crunchy rules and some games are maze rats? How does that stack up? Greg, you and I had a little bit of a talk about this after that podcast. What do you think?
Yeah. For me, I'd have trouble describing a game that's mechanically complicated as being terribly OSR, if that makes sense. Because one of these phrases that gets bandied about quite a bit is rulings, not rules, right? Like, you shouldn't need to enumerate rules that cover every conceivable situation. And like Humza said, even Dungeon Culture Classics, a lot of that spells and cool tables to roll on for awful things that happen when you cast spells. It's not insane mechanics and how they all work together. So me personally, I'd be hesitant to kind of describe that, because I do think a simpler system that allows you to be flexible at the table, to me, is one of the core aspects of something being kind of old school in that way. I'm super curious to hear what you say, Humza, because you got a little more skin in the game than I do.
Yeah, as am I.
So my take would be that it can vary, because one of the things that sets apart earlier versions of D&D from later ones, OD&D, like the original brown books, from there all the way up to second edition, I'd say that one of the defining features is that those all have a bunch of subsystems that are not necessarily integrated into each other. It's very modular.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah,
that's not always the case. You have some that tie into each other, but by and large, it's possible for someone to swap out one component or for another. Mm-hmm. You can say, "Oh, I'm running first edition AD&D, but I really like the way that BX did its initiative. I'm going to plug that in directly rather than dealing with AD&D's initiative." And it'll go along without too much issue. And from my perspective, third edition onwards, there was a bit of a push to have unified mechanics, something that it works the same throughout the entire game engine. Mm-hmm. And that means that it's sometimes easier for people to understand generalized cases, where in old school D&D, they can legitimately say, "Look, I was rolling high last time, now you're telling me you roll low. What is this?" And that can absolutely give a feeling of complexity, and I don't understand what's going on, and what is this? But it also means that because the systems are so modular, there's a lot more room for tinkering and for changing things around as you see fit. So it's completely legit, although frustrating definition-wise, to have a high complexity OSR game and a low complexity OSR game and say that they're coming out of the same design philosophy.
I think that's a really great perspective, and it does sound like the more I learn about this, the more it really is a community of people who share similar design philosophies and like to share their work with each other and riff on each other's work and hack each other's stuff, which is awesome. It sounds kind of like gamer paradise. Oh,
it's amazing. Yeah. There's so many fertile OSR blogs. Mm-hmm. It's just, people riffing back and forth. There was I don't know, Humza, if you were following Arnold K. and Scrap Princess going back and forth with the Inverted Monster Manual last week. I'm not going to repeat the titles of the posts because it's a family show. But it was just beautiful, them kind of going back and forth and responding to each other, tongue firmly planted in cheek. But there's so much cross-pollination going on. Mm-hmm. That's really the heart of it for me, is that the blogs and then feeding into G+. And, there's so many crowdsourced things. Dyson Logos actually just set up an OSR group over on Facebook, I think. Yeah. And they've been coming up with D100 tables all week. That's so much a part of it for me.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge community element of, we're going to go ahead, sit down, create cool stuff, and jam it all together and make it work. One thing I should add, though, is that OSR, and I should have actually mentioned this earlier, OSR takes on different meanings for different folks. Mm-hmm. There are going to be some folks out there who wind up saying, "No, I think it should be based very tightly on OD&D or AD&D First Edition, and stuff that's going too far outside that shouldn't be called OSR. And while that's not where I fall, that's an understandable perspective to me. And
definitely, that's what we were saying. Is like that's what I love when you said my OSR, because it really does come down to that. Because we're kind of on the same page, but there are some folks who would very vehemently disagree with a lot of the things we've already said in terms of what it means.
And while I would disagree right back with them, I would also recognize that the place they're coming from is not an unreasonable one.
Wow.
It's not necessarily the one I want to hang out in, but it's not unreasonable.
So, is there a general feel in theme to the OSR games? Because, it's interesting when I think about OSR, right? One of the first role-playing games I played was a game called The Fantasy Trip, which was Steve Jackson Games. It was 3 attributes. It was only D6s, very simple. And from that came GURPS, which is one of the most, crunchy, there's a rule for everything sort of systems out there. So when I think about old school, I do tend to think about, like, what my old school experience was like, right? And my old school experience was a little simpler and involved a lot of, and now playing with Greg, it's very similar, a lot of survival, a lot of killing monsters and taking their stuff. And you're not necessarily saving the world. You might be saving one person if you're saving anything. Some of it seems like maybe it's fueled by greed because it's got those old school D&D rules of experience points based on treasure or that kind of thing, right? So is that true? Or, when I hear that, like, Stars Without Numbers, it could be considered part of the OSR, that sort of blows up my whole idea of that. It's like, I guess it could be anything. Is that right?
I think that the community definitely angles more towards certain themes than others, but that's not saying that it's impossible to include some of those other themes in OSR games, merely that the community as it stands inclines more towards some parts than not. So, yeah, you definitely have a strong focus as it stands on things like XP through treasure earned for many OSR games, but that's not an exclusive. You have folks going, all right, that's cool and all, but what if I went ahead and instead shifted it to XP for exploration specifically? And that shifts the entire focus of the game away from dungeon crawling and delving deeper and trying to make that one big haul over into wilderness exploration. I want to see as much of the world as I can.
And then I would think both of those kind of come down to, I would say there's sort of a predilection towards sandbox style. Mm-hmm. Railroads, it's a real dirty word generally in the around the folks I talk to. So yeah, there's definitely a predilection for sandbox gameplay, and I think both of those would kind of map to that. Be it hex crawl or point crawl, right? You guys are awesome because I didn't even know about point crawl until I learned about Hydra Cooperative, and it makes things a lot simpler sometimes.
Well, let's we should define that too when you're doing
true.
Point. Yeah,
true.
Yeah, we should define point crawl because
I should jump back to that. But I mean, this idea that here's a world, here's a lot of cool stuff going on. All right, now players go do stuff, and the world's gonna do what it does based off of what you do. The players will chase what they chase, and the world will do what it does.
I think that's a great encapsulation. And so while you do have mechanics that in many OSR games that are often oriented towards treasure gives you XP, so if people focus on that, that's definitely not a binding thing by any means, and it's down to the players to figure out what kind of a game they want to make it. Do they want to make this something that focuses on going out and the traditional, like, I will go out and do good and be a superhero in a fantasy setting, or I'm going to be playing something more like all those denizens of the Mos Eisley Cantina, the scum and villainy, just looking out to make a score. The sandbox outlook shifts that over to the players and lets the DM just present a world and let it react and proactively take action based on what the players are doing as impulses.
Yeah, probably one of my just to riff off this a little bit, probably one of my favorite descriptors of the person who is, I don't even want to say running the game, because even that's putting too much weight on it. But, we say GM, we say DM. feel like every RPG that comes out has its own kind of special name for that person who's not a PC. But Lamentations of the Flame Princess calls him a referee.
That's right.
And that to me is like the perfect encapsulation of what I want my role to be. Mm-hmm. I'm not master of anything. I'm just adjudicating how the environment reacts to the inputs from the players and presenting, those results. So the players are the stimulus, and then they're getting back an effect, and then they keep, there's that righteous loop of player input.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that you were talking about modules in XP because, I run Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and that's got that old school, money found is XP earned. You get some pittance for killing things, but you're supposed to go and steal money from things that don't need it explicitly. But, I had a bunch of players who were like, oh man, this poor farmer guy, we got to save him. They spent like 7 sessions not getting any money because they were trying to help someone. So, I had to figure out a way to reward that because I want them to roll with their impulses. Mm-hmm. So it's like, all right, well, let me come up with an XP system that kind of works in that sense. So even then, you're swapping out, you're figuring out what kind of game you want to play and rewarding that player behavior. And in my case, the player behavior that I want to reward is whatever they think is interesting. So it makes it kind of tough sometimes, but that's part of the fun.
Yeah, and it also means that it's a very personalized thing for the referee creating their campaign as to what they really want to be presenting and how do you take the systems that are available and tweak them so that you get that and you are able to provide that experience for yourself and for the players.
And that makes sense then when you think about Stars Without Number, right? It kind of is a big hex crawl that says all of space is yours to explore, right?
Absolutely.
And so it does fit into that philosophy then of players driving where they go and things being more sandboxy as opposed to railroading. And I also think sandboxes in general tend to then tell not as like grand and epic of saving the universe. They certainly can, but they also allow stories to be more intimate, right? Greg, you brought up us trying to save a farmer, and that became...
I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, all right, sure.
Yeah, it became our save the world. Like 2 people died trying to save this farmer, and it was, I think if you asked them, they would say, like, yeah, of course it was worth it. It made a great story. It felt very Saving Private Ryan in that respect, right?
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So the opportunity is there to still tell stories that have these very intimate, high stakes. And just because you're not throwing a ring into Mount Doom doesn't mean that the story doesn't matter. I recommend everybody, especially if you haven't been playing, you sit down and you play some of these games because they help shift your focus and teach you about storytelling in different ways that can help in any game. You should always have those intimate stories at any game. Like, people watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer to see, like, is she going to end up with Spike or Angel? Not, is she going to save the world again? Like, we know the answer to that. She is.
What a good subversion if she didn't, though, right?
Yeah. That would be, I would watch that show, Buffy in Hell.
I mean, but that's, I think, one of the draws of something like Game of Thrones, where you have a bunch of characters who don't have that sort of grand destiny. You have a couple who do, like Jon Snow, where he's very much the protagonist TM, but you have others who look like they're shaping up to be the protagonist, and then they get a crossbow bolt in the gut, and you're like, where did that come from? I think that carries over into these games where, again, not a exclusive 100% thing, but many of them focus on play where characters are vulnerable, where there aren't necessarily that many safe routes, and where character death is not uncommon.
Yeah, like there's no plot protection here. It's easy to make a character for a damn good reason.
Yeah.
And that's because you might need to, in the middle of a session.
Exactly.
Hey everybody, just wanted to take a second to let you know all about this week's sponsor for Tabletop Babble, BarkBox. That's right, it's like Loot Crate for dogs. BarkBox is a monthly box that comes for your favorite pooch. It is full of treats, toys, and dog joy. You can get an extra free month of BarkBox when you go to getabarkbox.com/DSPN. That's getabarkbox.com/DSPN. BarkBox is committed to making dogs happy, and they work with local and independent businesses to achieve this. It's great for humans. It's great for dogs. Check it out. Make your dog happy at getabarkbox.com/DSPN.
So do you all think, because I certainly think this, that the OSR has begun to influence some of the quote-unquote more mainstream, because I think the OSR is a big part of this community, so I wouldn't even hesitate to say that it has become sort of mainstream in its own way, because it encompasses so many people and so many great games. But, you know, I think 5th edition D&D, you can definitely see a return to some of these ideas, particularly when we're talking about modularity and not throwing every single possibility out there and making the rules light and flexible enough that you can cover situations that aren't detailed in the book. You know?
And you can die again, so that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I managed to die a couple of times in 4th edition.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I killed some people in my 4E days.
All right.
But it's harder. It was a lot harder.
Yeah.
I rolled those 3 death saves, and they all came up bad, and my poor new character wound up biting it early on. So it's definitely doable.
Fair enough.
I mean, even if you look at the credits of 5th edition, you know, you see Zach Smith is in there, you know, who is, I would say, one of the big names in the OSR. That he had a hand in crafting some of the stuff. So do you think that there is influence there? Because I, for one, am glad for all of those elements in 5th edition.
I think there's definitely influence there. I think that 5th edition is, at the same time, still going its own way, which is entirely legit. Like, it's got a couple of
wizards, you know?
Yeah. And that means it's got a different set of design cues that don't necessarily mesh entirely with some of the OSR community's aesthetics and preferences, but that's completely okay. Like, everyone can keep on doing their own thing, and sometimes one person is going to want to play a game that the other side is doing, and it works out all right. Yeah.
And I would say 5th is, you were talking before, like, oh, maybe someone will have, like, in some amount of time, an OSR-fied, like, 4th edition. Like, someone's already making an OSR-fied 5th edition. Ben Milton, he's the guy who wrote Maze Rats, which is also great. He did kind of a take. He's working on sort of a take of 5th edition, and it's two pages, I think, plus spells. He wrote like a D100 table of spells because we love D100 tables in the OSR.
If you give us a list of stuff, that's all right. You give it a table, everyone gets excited.
Yeah. It's all utility spells, though. So you read that all the magic to encourage, again, bringing it back around to sort of this philosophy that sort of underpins a lot of this stuff is an OSR problem isn't you walk into a room, there's 5 goblins.
Right.
You know, if the obvious or only answer is, well, I'm going to murder some stuff, you know, that's not the default.
Right.
You know, the default is, oh man, well, Arnold K, he's got a great blog over at Goblin Punch, came up with some OSR style problems, right? And I'm going to read off a few here. There's one, it's like, oh, this bad guy cannot be hurt by any weapons forged by mortal hands. This glass sphere is filled with gems and horrible undead snakes. There's a circle of mushrooms. Oh, this one's good. There's a circle of mushrooms with a girl inside of it. Everything inside the circle of mushrooms will do everything in their power to get more people inside the circle. No save. The girl is already in the circle.
Huh.
You know, like, those are, like that kind of problem. Shouldn't have an easy solution. It should have, like, lots of angles of attack that are difficult. You know, no MacGuffin that you're forced to have. You know,
actually, that's one thing that comes to mind. Where a bunch of scenario design advice I've seen for this has been: don't necessarily write a problem that has a solution. Have options and be willing to accept a reasonable solution that you didn't think of. That's outside the box, because that's what you want players to come up with.
Yes, yeah, I think that is great advice for any person working on any tabletop RPG. It really is, because you want to design a computer game if you want every problem to have a single solution. And even now, computer games are evolving to the point where it's like, whoa, I can go about this stealthy, or I can talk my way through, or I can kick down the door and shoot, you know. And I think the OSR embraces that in a big, big, bad way. Bad meaning good. I think they really do, because it's, you know, like you said, Greg, it's not about like providing even a saving throw. It's about, here's the problem, and then see what the players come up with, and if it, you know, and then resolve it in a way that makes sense. I think is great for also prep. You know, because then the prep is fun stuff. The prep is like thinking of the snakes and gems in a giant glass thing, and then saying, I am open to solutions, right? Yeah. Like you said, being a referee, not necessarily a game master, which is cool.
It's funny how one little word can really alter my approach to, you know, it's just referee. Oh. This makes so much more sense now. You know, like I was running them through Sleeping Place of the Feathered Swine, which you can get over at RPG Now. I'm going to plug this because I think it's an amazing adventure, and you should it's pay what you want, but give Logan Knight some money, because I hate pay what you want. And there's some parasites involved in this adventure. And one of the players is like, oh, I want to rub some lard over it, because sometimes, you know, if they can't breathe, that slows them down. And I had no idea, you know, how to get rid of these parasites. But I was like, wow, that's a really cool idea. You know, like they were coming up, oh, maybe we can burn it out. Okay, well, let's figure out some rules for how you could maybe burn these parasites out. You know, like it was such a beautiful moment. They're just spitballing like, all right, well, what could we use? What kind of clever things could we manipulate to try to give us an advantage here? That's what I want. I want to see what they do, you know?
Yeah, I think that there's the community as a whole definitely favors the oddball solution, MacGyvered together from whatever you have on hand. MacGyver is possibly one of the OSR patron saints.
So if we have, you know, hopefully we've got some people out there who are interested in checking out the OSR. Where do the two of you recommend people start? Obviously, it sounds like G+, Google Plus is a very active community of people who are in the OSR.
Totally.
So, you know, time to, if you haven't yet, blow the dust off that Google Plus account and check that out. But like, as far as products go, what are some great things to check out? And please take the time to shamelessly plug your own stuff.
Oh man, I'll give you my gateway. How about that? And I don't have any products because we're idiots. So probably
you've got Secret Manticore. You've got something, man. Come on.
I really cannot emphasize how much of a joke all this is to us, and like, and by us I mean the Marvel Bank Club that put out the Secret Manticore. We have so much fun making this stupid stuff, and you know, our tagline is like, why are you paying for this? Just steal it somewhere. If we were even organized enough to have a tagline. It's the loosest grouping of fools enjoying themselves. But somebody told me about, you can get it over on Lulu. It's a free PDF. I'm sure James will throw up a link or something. Quick Primer for Old School Gaming by Matthew Finch.
I would just add a caveat to that. Matt's primer winds up being a really divisive thing. Because,
really?
Yes, and because I looked at it and I'm like, this is really helpful. This helps me figure out the sort of thing I want to do. It's very handy, and it was super influential to me early on.
Yeah.
And so I love it to bits. But you also have folks who look at it and get upset and say, all right, this thing is setting up an unfair argument against newer stuff, and they get all up in arms, and it goes back to that bit about, I don't agree, but I see where you're coming from, and it's not an unreasonable place.
Sure. Well, that's interesting. I haven't read it. That's what got me kicked off.
Yeah,
this whole thing.
Same here. So
I
I like it a lot. I'm right there with you. I just want to issue that note of caution that it can definitely rub some folks the wrong way. So I don't want someone to like look at it and say, this is awful, and dismiss the entire thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a fair caveat.
Man, there's so many blogs.
Mm-hmm.
I guess an easy place to start is over on False Machine, which is Patrick Stewart's blog spot, because he put together, admittedly, his kind of grouping and overview of a lot of the folks in the OSR and kind of what they're doing and links to them. So that's at least like sort of like a place you can find a bunch of links. And he just recently, the other day, put together a huge list of a bunch of visual artists who do work in the OSR. And my God, that's a good way to waste a few hours. It's just looking at so much gorgeousness.
His lineups of who's who are really handy for this. Mm-hmm. Also, we should probably clarify for people who haven't heard of him, this is not Patrick Stewart, or Sir Patrick Stewart, the acclaimed British actor. Right. This Patrick spells his last name Stuart. He is also British. He is not, as far as I know, a acclaimed actor who's captained the Enterprise. This is a different Patrick Stewart.
He's quite acclaimed, though, I would say.
Yes, quite acclaimed, but less for science fiction franchises.
Right.
Yes. I'd be surprised if the book that he put out with Scrap Princess under Lamentations, Veins of the Earth, I'd be surprised if that doesn't win an Emmy. They're sure to be more acclaimed, I think.
Oh, indeed.
I'd say, too, I mentioned before Arnold K. over at Goblin Punch. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I've ever encountered someone who writes ecologies and monster stuff better than Arnold K. I don't know. Just, I read his things and I'm like, wow, those monsters. So, of course, I haven't picked up Veins of the Earth yet. I keep hearing people talk about just how insane the ecology is there, too. So I don't know. James, that's what you're buying from me, Gen Con, by the way. Thanks.
You got it.
It's so hard because there's so many, Humza.
Yeah, there are a gazillion entry points, and it's hard to sort of narrow down how you want to hop in. I guess the one starter point is if someone wants to give this a try, to pick any one of the gazillion OSR systems that are out there and give it a whirl. So something like Labyrinth Lord is one of the earlier retro clones that's going after the BX edition of D&D from, I think, 1981 or 1983.
So I'm gonna interject this here because for a very long time, when I got started in all this, I had no idea what any of those things meant because I have not been playing D&D for 30-something years. So BX is...
BX is the code for Basic Expert. It's one of the earlier versions of D&D that TSR put out. The first book was written by a gentleman named Tom Moldvay, the Basic book. And then the Expert book was written by a gentleman, Zeb Cook. And so BX is also referred to as Moldvay Cook or the Blue Box.
Yeah, right. There's so many names, like a caution for all you listeners, because I basically jumped into the water and had no idea what was going on. I didn't even know what OSR was. Basically, this lady, Evie Lockhart, got me mixed up in all this, so thank you very much, Evie. There's so many additions, even Basic. There's Moldvay Basic, there's Mentor box set, there's Holmes Basic, there's a billion of these things.
Yeah, there are, and I think part of the the confusion is that there are way more than 5 editions, if you will, of D&D, right?
Yeah.
I think the most recent example people can probably think of is, there was 3 and 3.5, and a lot of other editions have a 0.5 or 0.25, or, they just didn't call it that.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, as a side note, James, if we can maybe in the show notes, link to... I've seen a bunch of graphics that break down the various editions, and a couple of them even have the retro clones that spin off of a couple of them. So if you think that might be of interest to the listener.
That would be super. It'd be of interest to me.
Let's see. In terms of introductory products, I guess a lot of it depends on what the players want to go for. If they want something that's super wahoo gonzo, like wild and crazy, then Dungeon Crawl Classics and some of the funnel adventures might not be a bad starting point.
Tell them about funnels, Humza. They don't know about funnels.
All right. So funnel adventures. Old school D&D is notorious for having low-level adventurers in the first to third bracket or so being pretty fragile. The character's hit points are low, so a single blow from an enemy has a good chance of taking out most characters. I guess more non-OSR games said, that's not what we want. We want to have characters who are a bit more robust, which is legitimate.
Sure.
Dungeon Crawl Classics, on the other hand, said, what if we did the opposite? What if we had, instead of these first-level characters starting out, we had a bunch of zero-level schlubs? You've ever seen the village mob that shows up to try and take down Dr. Frankenstein? You're playing those guys.
Yeah, that's your PC. One person's PC.
Or that, except it's not just one PC per player. It's 3 or 4 PCs per player, all zero-level schlubs, because you're pretty sure most of those folks are going to die or get otherwise taken out of play during the funnel. And so it's maybe like 5 or 6 players each maneuvering their 4 PCs through this dungeon, and at the end of it, after your characters have hopefully made it out alive, you look at the people the characters who survived, and you pick one of those as your starting PC, and you level them up. So the benefit here is that it winds up taking the starting character and making that a character you didn't necessarily expect you'd be playing. Right. And that's a big thing that a lot of OSR games like to go for. And you see that with rolling random stats, which in more modern games has become kind of deprecated. No, just use an array. It's much fairer this way. But the benefit of the rolling is that there's uncertainty and it surprises you. It surprises everyone at the table.
Right.
You look at, and this is actually where you have other games come in and exert their influence, where you have something like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay or Stormbringer, where like the profession of the PC winds up being a surprise to you and you didn't necessarily expect it, or Traveler, where you're rolling to get into careers. And this is shifting back over to the philosophy side, where one of the big things that the OSR that drives the OSR like for tables is that they're a way to surprise everyone playing, including the referee.
Yes.
There's a high priority placed on emergent play about things that no one expected showing up and taking the game world with them.
Wow.
Yes. I wanna take this opportunity too. You're talking about the profession being a surprise and kind of rolling for I don't remember what you called them in Warhammer.
Careers
and trappings and all this kind of stuff. You're sort of starting profession, all these sorts of things. I gotta plug one of my favorite OSR RPGs right now, the Meltonian Art Castle, specifically Daniel Sell, who wrote it, and Jeremy Duncan, who illustrated it, put out something called Troika, which I ran a one-shot in at the last mini-con that James organized up. And in Troika, you roll for a few stats. It's based on Advanced Fighting Fantasy, which was, I guess, an RPG that came out of fighting fantasy books. So it's just sort of like a choose-your-own adventure, but with stats and rolling.
Like the most famous one is the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, right? The old Steve Jackson stuff.
Yep, exactly. Right so Troika is a retro clone of that, and that's why my OSR definition doesn't just include broadly compatible with old D&D, because Troika is not. But Troika's totally OSR. In Troika, you roll your stats, and then you roll 2d6s. And I call it a D66 table, right? And whatever the 2d6s come up as, you look at the background table, and that gives you what you're good at, what you're carrying, and what your character is. And that's who you roll. That's it, and it's if you haven't checked out Troika, Humza, Dude, it's so good.
I've heard good things about it, and it's been on my list, but I haven't checked it out. I need to expedite that, especially since you let me know that Jeremy Duncan did the art. He's actually a old friend of mine from the early days of the Hill Cantons. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, there's and one of the cool things you were talking about, checking out different rule sets. Most of these OSR games have art-free versions that you can get for free. Mm-hmm. You get a PDF, there's the rules. That's how I got started with Lamentations.
Labyrinth Lord does the same thing, and not just for the basic rules, but also for what they call the Advanced Edition Compendium and for Mutant Future. So the Advanced Edition Compendium was, all right, Labyrinth Lord is duplicating this one version of basic D&D. What if you really want to play a D&D First Edition? Mash this Advanced Edition Compendium onto Labyrinth Lord, and you can get something that's a bit closer to AD&D 1E. And then Mutant Future was their retro clone for Gamma World.
Huh. Oh, I didn't know about Mutant Future. That's cool. I'm not as in tune with Labyrinth Lord because I started kind of with Lamentations. It's easy enough to convert, right? So I have tons of Labyrinth Lord adventures.
Yeah, the only thing that you need to... Well, no, not the only thing, but the main thing is, all right, people who are not fighters have a chance to hit better than they normally do.
Yeah. Yeah. But because of this random sort of career stuff, right? Random background... During my Troika one-shot, one of my players had a character who was a wizard and died pretty terribly. But the the other party members rescued his body, which is, pretty nice thing to do, honestly. And they're escaping back to their spaceship because it has a spaceship. The baked-in setting in Troika is amazing. There's no explicit fluff. It's all baked into the backgrounds. So they talk about traveling the million spheres and stuff. Off topic. They're carrying this PC's body, but what did he roll on his next character? Because he rolled it right there on the table because it's so easy. He rolled a necromancer. So they get back and they fight this kind of battle and they're trying to escape. And he has this character, Necromancer, comes over and is like, all right, well, I'll try the Raise Dead equivalent kind of spell. And it's varying, levels of success from absolutely nothing to body explodes to, terrible things. And the highest result you can get is perfect resurrection, right? And that's what he rolled. and so now he's got his second character bringing back to life his first character. And there's this awesome sort of interaction. He's like, oh, no, not that guy. Damn it. He's like, we can be friends now, the Necromancer says. And it's just, that's sort of exactly what you said, emergent gameplay. How else could that have happened in such a beautiful sort of kind of happenstance? It just all fell together so perfectly. And you can't have that sort of surprise if you don't introduce this element of chance and randomness.
And having that surprise, I think, is fun. And also, everything we've talked about beforehand, as far as what your rule set is designed to do, aids with that surprise. Having a rule set that helps you out with sandboxes and exploration and dungeon crawls and giving players problems that they can approach from multiple angles is all about that. That's definitely what it sounds like. So it sounds amazing. It sounds like it is a welcoming community that people can get involved in, and and there's all kinds of great games for them to check out. Before we go, Humza, I would love for you to plug what you do a little bit.
Yeah, man, you didn't talk about all the awesome supplement, all the awesome adventures y'all put out.
Because you've got all kinds of great stuff that can really be used with any system, I would say.
Sure. So I'm a partner, like I said, over at the Hydra Cooperative. My job has so far mainly been editor. So while I don't have anything of mine that's directly published, that's later down the road. We'll get there. I guess the first series of modules that we did that launched the company was started out with Slumbering Ursine Dunes, which was coming out of the game that I mentioned, the Tuesday night game that I've been playing in for ages, and wound up getting turned into a full product. That and its sequel modules, Fever Dreaming Marlinko and Misty Isles of the Eld, all linked together. They can be grouped up into your campaign, or they can be run as standalones as you see fit. We've also got Strange Stars, which is a system-neutral book that you can use with either Stars Without Number or with the Fate role-playing system. We've got Mort Zingersturm, which is the company's first 5th edition module, actually. That's taking some of the design sensibilities that we have with OSR stuff, but porting it over into a 5th edition format, and with more than a touch of whimsy. I think the tagline that we have is Adventure Time meets Oz meets D&D.
Whimsy's a good word. I'm excited about that one. I haven't checked that one out yet. But James, don't read Misty Isles of the Eld, okay? Side note.
I will not. That is a great plug, though. And it's really fun. I've had a lot of fun learning about this today, because I think it's even deeper than I thought I knew when I had tried to get some pre-education before this. You know?
I almost feel terrible in a way, because, I came on here to talk about the OSR and kind of ran about, we're talking about anecdotes and things that sort of exemplify it. But I feel like there's so many cool things that I didn't even touch on,
If I can channel Morpheus for a second, nobody can be told what the OSR is. You have to experience it for yourself.
That's true.
I agree, and I think people should definitely be open to checking it out. And it is a really great, amazing, creative community. And I think, Greg, what you're saying is I need to have you both back on. I think that's what you're saying, right?
That's fine. I'll talk about this stuff all day. I will say,
I
want to throw this in, though, since I didn't know. Well, there's lots of stuff in the OSR that's divisive. We argue a lot in general, like under that umbrella. But if Quick Primer for Old School Gaming might be divisive, I would then throw out the referee advice in Maze Rats, which is also pay what you want, but please give Ben Milton some money. So check it out, read it, be amazed, and then go, wow, and then give him a bunch of money. Because the referee advice in Maze Rats is an even more concise sort of distillation of a lot of the things that I value about how to run these games. Also, it's got some of the best tables for like spells and characters and cool stuff.
Well, there you go. I think that's I really enjoyed Maze Rats when we played that. So
I'm so happy to hear that.
I still have not played it, and I need to fix that as soon as I can.
Oh my god, the spell system, the magic is incredible. So much fun.
What are you doing after this? You want to play Little Maze Rats?
There you go.
It started out as like an offshoot of a different OSR game. It started off as a fantasy riff on Into the Odd, which is a little more industrial kind of flavor. But it's evolved into its own sort of 2d6 based system. Super simple, super easy to pick up. But his referee advice is so good.
That's great. Now, I had not realized that it started out as Into the Odd Descendant.
I didn't know that either until I hopped into a one-shot online with someone, and they were like, well, my rule book looks way different from what you're talking about. And then they told me about the Into the Odds part of it. It's gone through a few revisions, but it's gold. I guess I can't plug this stuff enough, because there's and that's why I didn't want to talk about Montecore, because there's so many people who have put out so many awesome supplements, and I talk to them all. I want people to buy their stuff not just because it's good, but because they're also awesome. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things where we really do have a pretty tight-knit community, and so you want to have everyone, you want to plug everyone's stuff because you know them, you've talked to them.
So hard.
Yeah.
There's just so much gold coming out of this kind of broad group, and it's so great. It's such a great time to be in RPGs right now.
Yeah, and not just our segment, but all RPGs. It's a freaking golden age out there.
Yeah, to see Joe Manganiello giving the intro to Stream of Annihilation. What?
Mm-hmm. I know.
So I couldn't even imagine this.
That guy's he's gonna be the next Batman villain, and he's talking about playing D&D. And they didn't get him just for that weekend. They record he's gonna have a whole 8-episode series where Matt Mercer runs him through some stuff. He's in Force Grey season 2. So yeah, it's great. It's awesome. And I do think it's a great golden age, which means that, much like the golden age of television, there is more television right now that is great than we will ever be able to watch. There are more games right now that are great than we will ever be able to play. So go out there and play as many as you can. That would
go get Slumbringer Sign Dunes because there's bears in it.
Mm-hmm.
Not just bears, war bears.
Yeah, war bears. And you can play a war bear. Mm-hmm. And it's probably one of the quintessential examples of a point crawl.
Yes, we did actually circle back and make that discussion.
Yeah, so that'll be a good way to close, as we should talk about what a point crawl is.
Oh, man, yeah. So like a hex crawl, so we talk about sandbox, you can do whatever you want, right? And then in a hex crawl, you're kind of moving around one hex on the map at a time, sort of investigating this wilderness and exploring. And usually it's kind of undeveloped. I'll toss out the West Marches style campaign that folks can read up on as a great example of a hex crawl, right?
Yeah, listeners should look up the West Marches by
Ben Robbins, I think.
Yes, there we go.
West Marches is awesome, so that's a hex crawl. But what's a point crawl, Humza?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Greg. A point crawl is a way of exploring through a wilderness area where it's a lot more limited in scope. You're zooming down to greater detail. And if you've actually explored any area of wilderness, you know that you cannot just rove in any direction without dealing with the terrain. Like, you have to follow the trails, you have to follow the various paths. You can try cutting out of those, but it's going to be hard going. So the point crawl winds up being a way to present certain wilderness areas where you have individual nodes that you can move between, and you're sort of negotiating your way from point to point within this confined area. It's almost a way of presenting it as a dungeon for the players where you have a bit more constrained choice, but also a way to really get to know the terrain that you're moving through and to engage with it and engage with the imagined physical reality of it.
I like what you're saying about kind of making it as a dungeon. It's almost like Overland as meta dungeon.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of describing and summarizing it.
Nice.
I think Slumbering Ursine Dunes may have been the first published product that used the phrase point crawl.
That's really cool.
I mean, I learned about it because of y'all. Chris Kutalik, author on that stuff. He's got lots of great point crawl advice over on his Hill Cantons.
Yep.
Cantons. I don't know how to English. I'm sorry. Over on his blog.
I think the word is originally Swiss, cantons, so you don't need to know how to English for saying cantons. Don't worry about it. But
that's kind of perfect, actually.
Chris blogs over at Hill Cantons, and again, it's a place where you have a bunch of codified GMing advice and ways to approach interesting rules problems that you can check out and integrate into your own games or not, as you see fit.
Humza, do you have a blog?
I do. I blog over at Legacy of the Bieth, LOTBIETH.blogspot.com. It is very rarely updated, but I'm hoping to change that as I'm starting to have more ideas percolating out, and fingers crossed, more time to be able to write them up.
And where else can people find you, Humza?
I'm on G+ as Humza K, Humza space K. I am on Twitter as @ALLANDAROS. Be aware that that's also dealing with my daytime job, so it's not just gaming and geekery. There's also immigration law discussion going on there too.
That is actually really interesting. I'm going to find you right now.
Right on.
And what about you, Greg? Where can people find you?
I would say it's split equally between Google Plus and Twitter. Google Plus, I'm pretty much all RPG related. Twitter is whatever the heck I feel like. So there's a lot of cool. I retweet a lot of artists because there's so many great artists that don't get any love or do get tons of love, but I've never heard of them. So, I like to learn about, appreciate that kind of thing. I also have, you were talking about, you have a blog that doesn't get very updated. I guess I have a blog too.
You do?
I do. Yeah, it's owlbearhugs.blogspot.com.
I love that name.
Thank you. It could be great, right? Because you could get an owl bear hug. Because it could be friendly, or it might eat you, right? That's how we do. But I've got 20-something posts in draft form and only 3 or 4 published. So, I know that feeling. But I'm going to get there, Humza. I'm going to get there.
Right on. We will get there together. We got this.
Yeah. James is my inspiration. He's so punctual. This guy makes so much stuff. He puts me to shame.
James,
that is
you're a machine, man.
He is.
Well, you guys have more life than I do, so that is probably why I'm able to make lots of things, because you're living your lives to the fullest, and I'm sitting in front of my laptop. It is awesome to have you both on here today. Thank you so much for giving me this education, and I do hope you'll both come back and continue to tell me more about the OSR.
Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. This was great fun, and I know I would love to swing back anytime you'd like to have us.
Awesome.
I really missed being on a podcast with you, buddy. I'm so glad to be here right now. It's awesome. And you introduced me to Humza. So rock and roll.
I know.
Yeah.
This is a friendship triangle budding right here. This is great.
I like this team that's forming.
Yeah.
Wow, that was great. I got the education I wanted, and we're going to have those gentlemen back because they are pretty awesome. Tabletop Babble is still a new show, and we could use your help to have others who love tabletop gaming discover us. How do you do that? Go leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or like us on Stitcher. It helps other people find the show. In fact, even if you don't listen to us through iTunes, go make an iTunes account and give us a rating. It takes 30 seconds. And then you can rate all of your favorite podcasts and help other people find them. It is awesome. To encourage you to do that, if you leave us a 5-star review, I will find it. And I will read it verbatim on the show. Make me say anything you want. This week's 5-star review comes from T-Bone Doug and is entitled, Is Good. T-Bone Doug says, Is good. Is not sucks. Is D20. Is V explode with good? Listen to with ear. Thank you very much, T-Bone Doog. I assume because this review comes from Canada, that is why there's some sort of French-English language barrier, probably. Love the review. Thank you so much, T-Bone. You are amazing. And if you want to support the show financially, but you don't actually want to spend any more money than you normally do, we've got a way you can do that. Head on over to don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com and use the affiliate links. They're big banners on the left-hand side of the site whenever you shop on Amazon or DriveThruRPG. In fact, once you click on them, bookmark them so that you always use them. And then we'll get a couple of pennies on the dollar from your sales. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does help out the show. That would be incredible. Before we go, I want to make a quick recommendation. Don't Split the Podcast Network has a ton of other amazing podcasts. Maybe you've heard of the DM's Deep Dive with Mike Shea. If you love D&D advice, you are going to want to listen to this one. It's a monthly podcast with the master of slyflourish.com himself. So go check that out. And if you want to check out the things I'm doing, head on over to worldbuilderblog.me and follow me on Twitter at James Introcaso. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Remember that RPGs are like sex. As long as everybody's having fun, you're doing it right.